It has been a very long time since the Chargers have had a dominant force in the middle of their defensive line, but the good news is there are a couple guys who could potentially be that at pick 22.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, this is supposed to be a fantastic defensive line draft, and unfortunately, Mason Graham is probably going to be gone by the time that the Chargers pick, but there's still going to be some great consolation prizes probably available at 22, and today we are going to look at 3 different options. The Michigan man, Kenneth Grant, obviously makes a ton of sense there, and then we're going to look at Derrick Harmon and Walter Nolan, 3 of the top interior defensive linemen in this draft.
And spoiler alert, you definitely do not want one of those guys to be the pick for the Chargers at 22, but that is not who we're talking about first, because it made the most sense to go with the Michigan man, Kenneth Grant, and it's easy when you look at him physically and when you turn on the tape to realize why teams would be interested, especially in the first round, for a guy with his skill set. And after Mason Graham, there's not a lot of consensus on who the next defensive linemen are. It really is kind of a pick your flavor in this draft, but when you watch Kenneth Grant and you see him, especially knowing a couple of things, because why would they take a defensive lineman? Obviously they have a need there. It's a very thin group right now. They lost their best guy in Poona Ford, and they answered that by a couple of short-term deals that aren't long-term answers. We've been begging and banging the table for a long-term answer and for premium resources to be spent at that position, because they haven't spent a day 1 or 2 pick on a defensive lineman since Jerry Tillery all the way back in 2019. So as far as why defensive tackle in round 1, that is what it is. And it might not mean it's your number 1 option, but if you're looking for a building block player, you're looking for a defensive lineman that can kind of anchor the middle of your defense for a very long time, this is a guy who would make a lot of sense.
It really would. Kenneth Grant is a fantastic option. And obviously he played at Michigan, so the connections are there. And we know Jim Harbaugh loves him some Michigan players and some Michigan coaches and just Michigan people in general. Right. That's what Coach Harbaugh wants to surround himself, which, hey, we all know the NFL is a big part of it is about relationships. So that's definitely going to factor into the decision when, you're picking players. And obviously if you know him more intimately, it's going to be a lot easier to be able to make that pick at 22 and bring in a talent like Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, and he's a guy, too, over the last couple of years who's been overshadowed by not just, the guy on his own team, Mason Graham, but also last year, Chris Jenkins. And a guy that, at least as far as why it would make sense, you already know how he fits, right? That's something you just never really get. You don't usually have your old college coach becoming your new head, your new professional coach at the next level. So knowing, hey, we know exactly what he would look like in a Jesse Minter defense. Now, we thought that about Junior Colson, and it hasn't worked out that way so far. But I think as far as what the pros are with this guy, I mean, when people talk about dancing bear, guys that don't move like they should, that definitely applies to him. I mean, he moves really, really well for being a gigantic human, has the quickness that really shows up on stunts. I think that's really kind of the best way he rushes the passer, because he is such a good mover, getting around, stunting and twisting and doing all of those things. One of the things I love the most about him, David, as far as the stats that he put up, though, 11 passes defensed over the last 2 years. If you can't get there, get your hands in a passing lane. He does that, and that's just a couple of the things as far as when I was looking at the pros for Kenneth Grant that popped out to me right away.
If you can't get to the quarterback, then impact the play somehow. That means getting those big paws up and trying to disrupt either the passing lane or getting that ball on the ground, right? That's one of those kind of unsung things that a defensive lineman doesn't get a whole lot of credit for. But yeah, Kenneth Grant, very large human with a very thick frame, and he isn't just a big guy. He has legit power. Like, he can move the middle of an offensive line. In 2023 against Alabama, he hit the center with a nasty spin move and went on to sack the quarterback. Like, that one was pretty effective, was pretty fantastic. Also, I saw him utilize a really good rip and swim move. I think he understands how to take good angles to be able to get to the ball carrier when he's trying to impact the game and run support. Does a good job of scraping down the line of scrimmage as well. So some of the things that I really enjoyed when I was watching Kenneth Grant, and, you know, just a guy who's just a gigantic force, 6'3", 340 pounds in the middle of your defensive line. That's the prototypical size that you're looking for from one of your big uglies.
Yeah, and long arms, right? More than long enough arms for the position. 33, 34-inch arms for a dude like this. And he uses them well, which is always nice. Not everyone that has long arms uses them super well. This is a dude who can lock out offensive linemen and be able to kind of, you know, find the ball carrier, stack and shed, do all of those things. I thought he also had a good feel for sniffing out screens. And he did have moments of collapsing the pocket as a pass rusher. I also thought another thing you would get with someone like a Kenneth Grant is like a legitimate weapon in short yardage situations. Like, this is a dude that you saw when you watched the tape, hey, in those short yardage situations, like, he's just creating just an immovable object. You might get around him, but he's the type of player that can just kind of stuff a quarterback sneak at times, stuff running back, or just totally collapse everything in front of a running back so they end up getting caught up in the backfield and not being able to get where they need to get to. And really strong anchor against double teams. This is not a guy that moves backwards very often. And that brings a lot of value. This fits the bill of being a more physical team, comes along with getting players like a Kenneth Grant. Now, would I take him over Colston Loveland? I wouldn't. Would I like him as an option at 22 if they went that way? I would definitely understand it. It might not be my first choice, but I think he's a player that's definitely worthy of a first-round pick if you think there's pass rush upside. And that's where the cons come in, because the ability to be an elite pass rusher is a big projection for Kenneth Grant at this point. Only 6.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons. There are moments. There are quick wins on tape.
Yeah.
But it's a huge projection. He is extremely raw, in my opinion, as a pass rusher.
Definitely. I think that when you're looking at the cons and you're looking at some of the things that he can work on heading into the next level of football, obviously it's deepening the repertoire, I think, is at the top of the list. Just trying to figure out more ways to be able to attack the quarterback and be able to add to that part of your game. We already know what you bring to the table as a run stuffer. That's very, very clear and obvious. But if you want to be a top pick and make an impact at the next level, you got to be able to do both of those avenues very, very well. For me, I think one of the things I was looking at, he needs to work on playing with lower pad level more consistently. I think I did see it on tape, but it needs to be more consistent, and that will definitely help him be more consistent when he's playing. Also, I think, and this is, again, he's 340 pounds, so, take it as you will, but I think he probably needs to work on the first step, explosiveness, speed, quickness, maybe just a little bit. But those are the couple of things that I looked at. And again, I'm nitpicking here. I really liked Kenneth Grant. It's easy for me to see why the Chargers would be able to pick him and why he would fit in this defense.
Yeah, I mean, not all defensive tackles have or even will have an explosive first step in as far as a pass rusher. And we're going to talk about a guy later on, and Walter Nolan, who I know you like Kenneth Grant more. Walter Nolan has the most explosive first step of anyone we're going to talk about on today's show. I think it's about consistency with him. Like, even if as a pass rusher he just became a pocket collapser, if he could just use the strength on an every down kind of basis, and even if it was just a bull rush to consistently collapse the pocket, you could see how there would bring some value as a pass rusher here. So that's what you're betting on, is you could do that. I think it's just being a little bit more consistent. Like, if you watch the USC game, you would think this is a top 15 pick. You would. But that's not what he looks like in every game. And he's usually very good. He's solid. But in that game, you see there's another level to it. So it is a bet, as are all these guys on your defensive line coaching staff and the elite job that they did with guys like Poona Ford and Tier Tart last year, that you're going to be able to get more out of it. Because the thing is, I don't know if I'm spending a first-round pick on a 2-down lineman. Even if it's a solid foundational guy, it's going to be there for a long time and bring that physicality. It's a later first-round pick. Maybe it's more of a trade back, but I'm only making this pick if I think there's a little bit more under there as far as the pass rush goes, and maybe I can get a little bit more out of him than they did last year at Michigan when Jesse Minter wasn't their defensive coordinator. But we will be getting into another guy that I think we both had a lot of fun with, and that is Derrick Harmon, who had almost as many pressures as both the other guys we're going to talk about combined. So we're getting into him, and if he makes sense for the Chargers at 22 and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. March Madness is still here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before because the Final Four has arrived, and it should be just banger after banger. We're talking about 4 1 seeds still left in the tournament, and I mean, Cinderella stories are nice, and they're so great to bet on with FanDuel, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty, you want to see the top powerhouses facing off against each other, and you have 4 number 1 seeds and still time to get on the action during March Madness. And right now, new customers can bet $200 in bonus bets. If you get first $5 bet wins, that's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories to who's cutting down the nets. I like Duke to win it all, but it's right now at plus 105. They are the prohibitive favorite. If you want to go a little bigger, Florida at plus 270, I do not hate at all. But all you have to do to get in on the action, visit FanDuel.com and get all of the college hoops action you can ask for all tournament long. Dave, let's get to our second of the defensive tackles that make the most sense for the Chargers at 22. The guys who could realistically be there and the guys who the Chargers could realistically take, because I do think it is a need that has to at least be at the front of Chargers fans' minds as far as who could be an option for them at pick 22. Last year, when everyone was picking Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., they went with Joe Alt, right? So as everyone's, going Colston Loveland and going with these other potential, options at 22, they could surprise us again and go in the trenches and go with an interior defensive lineman. And at least as far as positional need and positional value, it would be hard to blame him for that. But let's talk about the next guy here who I wasn't as familiar with him before I turned on the tape, which is why I was so pleasantly surprised. Because I think when you're talking about the 3 guys that we're talking about right now, it's the least amount of projection needed with Derrick Harmon, the defensive tackle for Oregon, another guy with prototypical size. Size is not an issue with these first couple of guys we're talking about today. This one's 6'5", 313 with 34 and 3/8 inch arms. Yeah, that's going to do it at the NFL level. That'll do it as far as that frame goes. But I think as far as ability versus the run to hold up against double teams and also the bag to create pressure, which he had 55 of them last year, according to PFF, this is a guy where you don't need as much projection to see how he could be good.
No, not at all. And yeah, I wasn't very familiar either. Excuse me, sir. I apologize. Was not familiar with the game, but I am now, and I am very impressed by what I watched. As you said, he has that prototypical size that you like, and a guy that just looks the part. He looks like a tank out there.
Yeah.
It looks like he's in great shape. Showed a lot of versatility, playing multiple different positions across the defensive line, and was able to be effective kind of wherever that you put him. Has the power to hold up against double team blocks. Displays a bevy of pass rush moves that I saw, like a dip and rip move. He utilized a swim move, bull rush, obviously also. Like
the long arm he used a lot.
The long arm. Like he had a lot of different ways to be able to attack offensive linemen, which, hey, at the next level, your first move is not always going to work, and a lot of the times it's not going to work. So you have to have plan B, plan C, and plan D to be able to, to be able to put out there and execute, right? If your first move doesn't work. And I also felt like he routinely got quick penetration and disrupted the timing of a lot of plays. Not even, if he was not able to make the play himself, his ability to penetrate quickly and get to where that ball carrier was supposed to be was going to disrupt that play and disrupt the flow of that play. So he is a player that has a lot of things that you really, really like, parts of his game that are easy to see translate. And you can really come up with several comps that say, yeah, that guy right there and that play style is going to work in the NFL.
Well, and sometimes you see it and the production doesn't match it, right? And I think those are always the hardest ones to kind of project and to kind of, see how it's going to turn out. This is a dude that has both. Like, it looks the part. When you turn the tape on, you see why he's good, right? Yeah. I mean, like I said, 55 pressures and also 5 sacks, which is a big number for a defensive tackle in college, obviously. But I thought it was also telling that he had his best 2 games of the season against the eventual national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, too. And their Donovan Jackson and their offensive line that's going to have some guys drafted from it as well. One of the better offensive lines he was going to go up against all year. He had the best games against that offensive line. And I did think that he probably doesn't use it enough, but like when he decided to go power and just try to push and collapse the pocket, it was there. It felt like every time he did it.
Yeah.
Like it felt like when he decided I'm just going to overpower this dude in front of him, he didn't always do it. And it's interesting when you're watching these games because it felt like against Penn State, they were like, hey, control your rushing lane. We don't want you getting too crazy and too far upfield because Drew Allar might run and you would need to just be more confident, more concentrated on that than actually getting to the quarterback. So you have to watch multiple games because when he decided to let it rip, he let it rip and he got through. And I mean, according to PFF, had a 26.5% win rate on true pass rush sets, which was second in college football last year. So he had the pressures, had the sack numbers, but then, there's always cons. And, there's a lot of good with him, and there's really only one downside to him. Not finishing plays in the backfield. Like, when I was thinking about cons, like, it was just the same thing because, like you said, he gets to the spot. He beats the guy in front of him. He's where he needs to be, and it's almost exactly like we saw with Tuli Tuipulotu coming out of college. That was our biggest thing is, like, he, led the country in sacks that year, was second, and it felt like he could have had 7 more.
Yeah.
He had 5 sacks that felt like it could have been 12 sacks, David, when you're watching the tape.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to finish. And again, I guess it begs the question is, right, do you want somebody who gets to the spot, is able to disrupt the play, and have the potential to finish, or have a player that's not even making an impact on the play, and then you have to kind of teach them how to make that impact and how to finish? I would much rather have the player that's able to make an impact on the play, and then we just have to coach up the finishing part of that, of his game, because you either have that ability to disrupt or you don't. And I firmly believe that Mr. Harmon has the ability to disrupt plays, and I think that can continue to be coached up at the next level. And if he does that, if he's able to just finish out those plays, not only as a pass rusher, but as a run stopper as well, then he can really take his game to the next level and make himself some real money in his second contract. But that brings me to one of my biggest cons is the missed tackle rate is absolutely insane with him. It's he missed 10 tackles, which, considering he only had 45 combined tackles, that's a lot of missed tackles to consider. Yeah. That's a gigantic amount.
You're talking 20+% missed tackle rate there.
20+% missed tackle rate. That's got to get cleaned up, especially for an interior defensive lineman where you don't get a ton of opportunities to tackle. You have to be able to make good on that. So
it's usually
got to clean
short
that up.
Spaces too, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing about being a defensive tackle is, usually you can see a lower missed tackle rate because you're tackling in a phone booth to an extent, but you also have big 300-pound dudes trying to block you as well. Sure. So that's all part of it. I think the interesting thing is it's not about the tackle radius. Like I told you, he has almost 34.5-inch arms.
Right. This is the antithesis of Denzel Perriman. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like with Denzel Perriman, sometimes I'm like, man, if his arms were just 3 inches longer, like he'd just be such a tackling
all-world,
machine.
bro. It'd be
his
not fair.
Missed tackle percentage would go down by 10% if he just was born with a little bit longer arms, But
seriously,
with this dude, that's not the problem. The tackle radius isn't the problem, and I think the big thing is just control and being able to find that control once you get into the backfield. He has no problem getting into the backfield. You want someone to get into the backfield. But there has to be a certain level of control once you get there. And the Chargers, in the past, under different regimes, have taken that risk before with a guy like Derwin James, who, that was the big thing for him coming out, was just, he always is 100%, and, he's always just hair on fire, aggressive, and that
missile,
leads to the best parts of his game, and it also leads to the worst parts of his game when he can't control it. So I think, Tuli, same thing, right? He got in the backfield all the time, but he had such a hard time finishing, and he has a little bit shorter arms too, at least for that position. But I do think that with him, you can see it. And if you're telling me, hey, all I have to do is make this guy finish, 50% better than he is right now, and you have a true force in the middle of your defense, you can sign me up for that. Because I think
an 8 to 9 sack guy, if he's able to finish that a year, absolutely sign me up.
And it's
100%.
and it's easy to see it with him. With Derrick Harmon, it's easy to see
Yeah.
it. You can see why would be a first round pick, and you could look at 3 different big boards, and you could see all 3 of the guys we're talking about ranked at 1, 2, or 3 because there is no consensus on these guys. And this was the guy to me where maybe he doesn't have the upside, maybe he doesn't have the physical elite traits that maybe these other guys have. He doesn't have the first step of Walter Nolan. But it's easy for me to see how he could just be a very, very good player for you for a long time. And I see that with Derrick Harmon. Whereas with Walter Nolan, David, I know you are not sold on him being the Chargers pick at 22. And we're going to tell you exactly why and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. David, let's finish up our mock draft Monday here talking about the last of the most realistic defensive tackle options the Chargers could take at 22, which definitely is a position they could try to address in round 1. But thank you to all the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today. If you want to keep up with the draft every single day, even when we're not talking about it, make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft, where you have Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Damian Parson will be on the show next week. You're very excited to have him on as they keep you up to date with everything draft related as we head to the big day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. The last one is the most controversial of the guys we're talking about here today, David, and I understand exactly why you're having a hard time because, I mean, at one point when me and you were both watching the film, you said, this dude's supposed to be a first round pick? Question mark? Because you didn't see it right away. And when we do these, we're talking about guys that, usually can at least make a good argument for taking them at 22, even if it wouldn't be your preferred pick. This is a guy you had a very hard time wrapping your head around that with.
I did. I really had a hard time, trying to find the positives in his game to where it made me feel like it merited a first round pick. I mean,
Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, of course.
Right, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, and he did have some positive aspects of his game. I mean, I think you look at, he's got some pretty good sack production, 4 and 6.5 sacks the last 2 seasons. That's really good from an interior defense lineman. So I got to give him credit for that. As opposed to Mr. Harmon, Walter Nolan has a fantastic missed tackle rate. He's very, very sure-handed from that perspective. A career 4.7% missed tackle rate. So when he's getting those opportunities to get a ball carrier on the ground, he's doing it very effectively. And also, I felt like he does play with good effort. He definitely plays with very, very good effort. He showed good effort on a sack against Florida where he really had to kind of keep going. It was probably a little bit of a longer play, about a 4 or 5 second play. But
effort sack, sure.
After that first initial effort, he didn't give up, and he found a route to the quarterback, and he was able to finish the play. So, as far as the positive aspects of his game, those are some of the things that I feel like reflected positively upon his game.
Yeah, and you could talk about the positives, but obviously you don't think the Chargers should take him there. So what was it that made you think that they should not take him?
Yeah, one of the primary reasons is when he was going up against the powerhouse teams like the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world with the bigger, more physical offensive linemen, he was getting manhandled. Like he was just getting pushed out of the way and really they really were able to neutralize his effectiveness. Also, he doesn't really have any counters as a pass rusher. Like after his first move, is thrown out there and he's stopped. He doesn't know what else to do. He doesn't have anything else to put together, and he kind of is done with the play. Also, like to see him shed blocks better. I feel like that's an aspect of his game that needs development. He just doesn't do it for me. I really had a hard time seeing why people thought that this was a first-round talent player. So, yeah, I mean, I just had a hard time envisioning it for the Chargers.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We're going to pick a lot of guys, and we're not going to like some of these guys. And some of these guys aren't going to make sense for us, for the Chargers specifically, and especially in the first round at 22. We're not talking about a trade back into the second round and then maybe taking him early then. We're talking about them taking him in the first round where they're slotted right now. Maybe as a trade back guy, maybe you could bet on the upside, and I'd feel a little bit better about it if there was another top 100 pick in the mix or something along those lines. I think the hardest part about Walter Nolan specifically is the scheme that he was in and just how the coaches decided to use him. Because one of the biggest cons that I had for him is just how often he gets washed out of the play. Like, I mean, so many times you're seeing him just get on the move, laterally and then have two guys, kind of pushing him around and kind of controlling exactly where he's going. The problem with that is Ole Miss schematically was slanting him so often where they're just having him take these really, really aggressive angles, either right or left. And when you're doing that, especially against a running team like that, and they get you going laterally and you can't beat the guy immediately and get into the backfield, you're going to get washed away and you're going to get pushed out of the play. That's what made it so tough for me, because I think when you're talking about the pros for him, to me, the talent jumps off the tape because of what you see in those flashes. Like, you see strong hands at times where he just pops a dude off the line of scrimmage with that elite first step that he has and rocks them back, and they're kind of stunned and shocked there for a second. You see that, but you don't see it consistently. I like the fact that he really has that motor and he does keep going. If he doesn't get past on the first move, he's not going to stop and just stand there. He's going to keep trying to work and get closer to the quarterback. He's just not refined enough to have the kind of counters and the plan that he needs to be effective doing it. So there's a lot of pros that also have their cons with it, but I do think I didn't see, the second highest graded run defender per PFF behind Mason Graham, which is what he ranked. But you never know what games. We're not watching every single game, right? But we're watching, the all 22 40-minute videos of 3 or 4 games of everyone we're talking about. So it's like you might not get, the right games that people are so hyped about. But I didn't see, just a guy that would automatically say, hey, yes, at 22, you take him. He has the most sacks of anyone on this list, right? He's a great effort player who, out of all the guys we're talking about today, had the most chase down tackles from the backside, as far as not giving up on the play and maybe saving 3 or 4 yards by getting to the running back. He's a guy that I watched as a defensive tackle chase down a couple of screen passes and make tackles on the outside the numbers. He has the effort there. But I think, David, a pick like this is just so hard because you have to have such trust in your coaching staff that they're going to get the best version out of this guy, even knowing that it comes with the risk of him potentially flaming out.
Right. And just when you're talking about a first round pick, right, you have to try to mitigate those risks as much as possible. And you have to try to figure out, hey, does this player have enough of those, premium traits that I feel like I can utilize and I can put that in my defense and it's going to make an impact for me. And I think one of the things that sticks with me when you're talking about him having to slant so much, we had Braden Fehoko on the show and he told us, like, hey, you just don't know what they're asking us to do specifically in this defense, right? So it's really hard from that perspective to be able to evaluate exactly what he could do because you don't know what he was asked to do for that defense. But for me, I just don't think this is the player with the traits that I would feel very good about them taking at 22. It's just not there for me. So I would like to see them going in a different direction at 22 with a player that has a little bit more surefire, this is what's going to make an impact. I know it. I am confident in it type traits that I just don't see with Walter Nolan.
And I think the thing about draft season is like, no one's ever going to have the same opinion. And the only way you can go wrong is if you go against kind of your own instinct and against what you see specifically, right? Yeah. I think as far as the argument for the Chargers taking someone like this would just be betting on a huge pass rush upside. Yeah. And betting specifically on the traits. Because that's one place I would disagree. I think he has traits. But like traits only get you so far unless they're realized and turned into production and they translate at the next level. You can't get washed away like this dude does and did, a bunch of times at the college level and open up the holes that were getting opened up.
That's my biggest issue.
Jesse Minter's not going to tell him to torpedo himself, 7 yards to the right and totally take himself out of the play. But it's hard not to hold the scheme against the player, I think is kind of, one of the things you're dealing with because the dude has the production. I mean, the production speaks for itself. 14 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks is an insane stat line to put up for a defensive tackle that is going to go, end of the first round, beginning of the second round, probably. At the same time, when you look at it and you see kind of the bad plays that are mixed in, like it does really feel like it's very boom or bust for him. He had a lot of tackles for loss. He got in the backfield. When he got there, he made those plays. But there were also a lot of times where he did get washed away and he wasn't and took himself out of the play too. So very boom or bust. I think it is a volatile pick. I think it is a risky pick if they were to take Walter Nolan at 2022 or at 22. But I do think it would be because of the faith that they have. Yeah. And also because theme of the offseason, this is a dude that Michigan really wanted when Jim Harbaugh was their coach. He had Michigan in his top 5 before ended up going to Texas A&M before transferring to Ole Miss last year. But he really wanted Najee. They got Najee. He really wanted Walter Nolan. We'll see if the Chargers feel the same way and go in that direction in round 1. But that's just part of, us trying to get to all the realistic options at pick 1 for the Chargers. We talked about the running backs with Marion Hampton, Ashton Genty. Talked about the tight ends with Colson Levelin and Tyler Warren. And we talked about also edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku. And also we talked about the wide receivers Matthew Golden and Teteroa McMillan. So we just wanted to go through and talk about the most realistic options. Next Monday, or going forward on Mock Draft Mondays, we'll get into more 2-round, 3-round mock drafts and things like that. But that is going to wrap things up for today. We will be back with you guys on Wednesday with Buy or Sell Wednesday this week, because today is my daughter's first birthday. Happy birthday, Dylan. I love you so much. I can't wait to celebrate with you. And thank you guys for understanding this special day for me and knowing we will be back with you on Wednesday with one of our favorite shows of the week with Buy or Sell. So make sure if you guys want to get your Buy or Sell on the show, hit us up at Locked On LAC. Hit us up on our voicemail line at 323-524-7924. Or also, you can hit us up on Instagram at Locked On Chargers. We'll put a post out on YouTube where you can hit us up there, or on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page as well. But make sure you guys are back here Wednesday for Buy or Sell Day, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.